Rankings, Representative Velia Cicarella. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here. Looking forward to a good meeting and like to dive right in and get going with General Ivan. Good morning, General. How are you?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Chairpersons, Senator Cabrera, Representative Boyd, and distinguished members of the Veterans Affairs Committee. As most of you know, I'm Major General Fran Ivan, the Adjutant General for the state of Connecticut. I'm joined today with some key members of the staff. I thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today to discuss two agency bills on the agenda. House Bill 6427, an act concerning the organizational structure and bylaws of the militia units, and House Bill 6428, an act establishing a law enforcement support office program account. Key to note is both of these bills present no cost to the state and previously received joint favorable reports from this committee. They're common sense initiatives aimed at department efficiency and modernization. But before I highlight the major points of each bill, I'd like to provide you with a quick and a brief update on the agency's operations. And I'm going to attempt to share the screen here with you. As you are painfully aware, the COVID-19 pandemic caused an unprecedented demand for military support to the state's response efforts. To date, over 1,000 members of your Connecticut National Guard and the organized militia have conducted a wide variety of missions which continue to this day. From managing medical equipment and PPE logistics to nursing home safety inspections to support for COVID-19 testing, and now today vaccination sites, our airmen, soldiers, and militia members have selflessly answered the call to duty in their local communities, and their performance has been and continues to be outstanding. The National Guard also provided relief efforts in the wake of Tropical Storm Isaias and election and inaugural security operations. Our team of highly trained cyber specialists provided critical information technology support to the City of Hartford and to the Secretary of State. Meanwhile, 300 additional guardsmen and women deployed to Washington, D.C. and the state capitol to conduct inaugural security operations and infrastructure protection operations as well to ensure the safe transfer of government down in D.C. All the while, our force continued to conduct regular training following COVID-19 protocols in order to maintain readiness for our federal mission. We currently have 100 guardsmen deployed and approximately 700 scheduled to deploy next month. 600 of those 700 are that are going to deploy are soldiers of the storied 102nd Infantry Regiment out of New Haven, which will deploy next month to East Africa to conduct stability and peacekeeping missions. This will be the battalion's third deployment in support of Operation Enduring Freedom since September 11th, 2001. The citizens of Connecticut can rest easy at night knowing that the Connecticut National Guard has and will continue to live up to its motto, always ready, always there. And now on to House Bill 6427, an act concerning the organizational structure and bylaws of the militia units. This is the fourth year the bill has been pending before the legislature. It previously received a joint favorable report from this committee. It's a no-cost bill that updates antiquated and obsolete statutory language. The bill will permit, but not require, and that's important, configuration of all state military units in a manner similar to modern federal counterparts through the direct adoption of bylaws, regulations, and general orders. In its simplest terms, this bill eliminates the requirements for all subordinate military units of the state, including the National Guard, to create and submit bylaws for the governance for the Adjutant General's approval. Rather, as a commander, and most federal organizations today will issue bylaws and orders of general applicability to the units under the command. This is in keeping with today's military and current standards. This is already the manner in which the Army and Air National Guard conduct business along with the State Guard. This codification of current practices eases the administrative burden associated with the current obsolete language. The proposed bill helps ensure the elements of the armed forces of the state are appropriately organized, ready, and able to execute their duty when they are most needed. Now, quite honestly, you'll hear opposition on this bill from the trustees of the First Company Governor's Foot Guard, a private organization. And let me make it perfectly clear that they are not members, they are not current members of either of the two foot guards or the two horse guards. This bill only affects the actual militia unit under the command of the state military department, the First Company Governor's Foot Guard and their sister companies, the Second Company Governor's Foot Guard and the First and Second Company Governor's Horse Guard. You will also receive testimony in support of this bill from actual members, maybe even a commandant or two of those units, and how our department's modernization efforts have been beneficial to those units. To understand why this is a relevant proposal, look at the operational employment, and it was in the first photo, of the Governor's Guard during the opening battles of the COVID-19 pandemic, in the successful deployment of the Department of Public Health's Mobile Field Hospital. An example of a traditionally ceremonial unit made into an operational relevance during a time of crisis. This bill aids in the continued modernization and efficiency of the Governor's Guard. It does nothing to take away from their rich ceremonial tradition and gives them further relevance and survivability well into the future. I ask you to consider the statutory charge to ensure these state military units are properly trained, they're equipped properly, their equipment is properly accounted for, and their existence of value to the state and its taxpayers goes on into longevity. I ask you to no longer push the bill down the road another year due to a small group of misinformed individuals opposing the bill. In fact, failure to recognize the modernization of this proposal actually jeopardizes the future of the 4 governor's militia units. Moving to House Bill 6428, an act concerning the establishment of law enforcement support program. It's also a no-cost bill that previously received the joint favorable report from this committee the last 2 legislative sessions. This bill creates a non-lapsing account for the military department to ensure appropriate accountability of state funds associated to what we know as the 1033 program, the program through which excess federal defense equipment may be loaned to state law enforcement agencies. The military department is a state agency designed to implement the 1033 program in Connecticut, and as previously discussed with this committee, a member of the State Guard on state active duty is used to administer the program and is as necessary. It's approximately 2 days a week. That member is funded through fees paid by participating law enforcement agencies, which traditionally amount to about $30,000 a year. The recently passed act concerning police accountability, it restricts, but it does not eliminate the program. A large number of law enforcement agencies will likely continue to access and acquire excess defense property as permitted by the act, hence the continued need for this account. And the equipment's not all about weapons and up armored vehicles. The equipment includes long-range cameras, underwater sound equipment, range finders, cold weather gear, and search and rescue helicopters. Currently, these funds are deposited in an unrelated military account that will likely cause an unnecessary future audit finding. As the agency designated to implement the 1033 program here in Connecticut, the military department needs a separate account to keep these activities transparent to you as legislators and members of the public, not commingled and buried in unrelated accounts for other activities. In this regard, this bill serves as a complement to the act concerning police accountability and again increases transparency. I thank you for your time, your continued support of the military department, the National Guard, our militia, and our state veterans. And this concludes the testimony, and I am prepared with our staff here to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you again.
General, thank you very much. Before we move to questions, just to allow me a quick moment of personal privilege. Just want to thank you and for your leadership, especially on Inauguration Day, in providing security and making us all feel safe as we took our oath of office. We really appreciate that. Are there any questions for the general?
Thank you.
Representative Boyd, followed by Representative Turco.
Good morning, General. Welcome back. We appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Right.
And I also appreciate the work that the Guard and the military department is doing. You guys have had a busy, ambitious year, and you guys have served with distinction and represented the state of Connecticut well. So it's something we could all be proud of, is the work of the Guard and the military department. I just wanted to jump into a couple questions about, and I think you did a very good job setting it up. There's a lot of confusion around the organization of the State Guard. I don't think people understand the different elements, the difference between the State Guard and the National Guard and the ceremonial aspects. Could you just take a second and just give us a quick, minute overview of what the military organization looks like under your command, including the active Guard units as well as the state militia under statute?
I sure can. So we have both the Army and the Air National Guard, basically federally reimbursed state entities, right? And they report through the Connecticut Military Department, through us, and also have changed the reporting lines to the Air Force and to the Army through the National Guard Bureau in DC. We also have the State Guard, and as I pointed out in testimony, the 4 Governor's Guards. Now, traditionally, 75 years ago, the Governor's Guards were ceremonial. And like the National Guard, specifically back to, I believe, 1916 and the Dick Act, when the guards across the nation were funded federally and brought under one standard, this is really the same accomplishment that we're trying to get to with this proposal. So the vision we've had specifically in 2019 was to have, because every year, traditionally, the legislature would ask, why do we need the Governor's Guard? Why General or Adjutant General, whoever was in the seat, this goes back at least to the previous Adjutant General as well, why do you need horses? Why do we need a horse guard? So we've put all 4 units on a path to self-sufficiency. Specific to the horse guard, they own property. Obviously, they own the horses and upkeep of the horses. We, thanks to your support previously from this committee, we've got a stall rental program that puts them on a path to self-sufficiency and requires less from a state budget perspective. The 2 horse guards are basically the most expensive from the upkeep perspective, but we also spend assets on the horse guard as well from our state budget. In 2019, so currently, if you're a Guard member, traditionally you would drill at a given armory, you would attend an annual training. 75 years ago, you probably got paid for your annual training. With this current status, over the years, many years, with the state budget, they no longer get paid, so they do this for the flag. Our vision in 2019, and we just got lucky, quite honestly. So we have an MOU, or at that point we had an MOU with the Department of Public Health. We were able to get the members paid, and they rehearsed and set up the mobile field hospital. Who would have known that in 2020 we would actually have to plug it in and make it operational? So the vision is, and the goal is, to find the sweet spot where they're both ceremonial, which they currently are, and they're somewhat operational, so that we can justify their relevance as we go forward into the future. And Representative, I hope that answers your question.
It does. And just so we're clear too, the state of Connecticut, through our appropriation process, appropriates funds to maintain these units to some degree as well.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Because one of the arguments that I'm hearing and I'm trying to wade through is, there's concern about, who's going to control the money, who's going to control the buildings, who's going to control the assets. And so my understanding, trying to look at this objectively, is that they're with these units, they're state assets and state funding. And then there's a nonprofit incorporated aspect to these groups. And really, you're asking us to better organize the military side of the house, the state asset side, but you're not saying that the nonprofit side of the house you want to have any aspect of it. There's a clear separation there. Is that my understanding?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the trustees are actually incorporated to support the unit. You know, in a future debate, we can argue that they're actually not doing that, and there's some legal business going on with the Attorney General in respect to that.
Sure.
They have equipment. So there's a debate over some of the equipment. The Office of the Adjutant General is charged with the well-being and morale, training and readiness of the unit. It's charged with the accountability of the equipment. The trustees are a private organization set up as a nonprofit to support the unit, and I'll leave it at there.
Okay. And so the ultimate goal of the military department is to basically better utilize these units within the statewide organization. So as you said before, that obviously this committee is interested in maintaining the ceremonial side. I think the military department is, it's a great tradition we have in the state. And I don't think there's any person in the legislature or this committee or your department that wants to see, that ceremonial side go away, because it is truly a distinct thing for our state. But you're asking that these units become part of the overall military structure and become more operational in addition to their ceremonial responsibilities. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And I mean, they're part of the Connecticut Military Department. The best way I can describe this is they currently they write their bylaws, they submit them for approval up to my office. And we either can approve them or deny them. We're trying to eliminate that burden. Quite honestly, we're trying to, and the best example I can come up with is, if your kids made the rules, right? And then, and you had no say as a parent, then how would that look like? So this gets everything in line. I talked about weapons. So, God forbid that a militia unit has an accident, maybe at a range, or one of those weapons gets stolen. The person accountable for that, and we have the state auditors every year that come in. We do all equipment and accountability of all our equipment and facilities. This office, the Office of the Adjutant General, is responsible for that. If any of those members got into legal trouble, if there was an assault, a sexual assault, that all comes under this agency. And the trustees, you probably would not be able to find them if something went south. So this just gets everything in line. And I know you'll hear some of that later on. This is no longer when I speak of modernization, we take the trustees and what was 75 to 100 years ago as a social unit. And what we see in social units like the VFW, like we see with the American Legion, their membership has dwindled. The four commandants, a couple of who you'll meet today or have provided testimony, have grown their units because they want current members want to be both operational and they want to learn the lineage and the history. And I think this proposal gets us closer to finding that sweet spot with both.
All right. Thank you, General. Appreciate your time and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Representative Boyd. Any further questions for the General?
Representative Turco.
Thank you very much. General Levon, it's great to see you again. And I'm going to continue the dialogue based on the conversation Chairman Boyd just had with you. I think Chairman Boyd started along with some of the issues that you and I have previously discussed that I'm still trying to find some clarification around. And since my last conversation with you, I've received some additional emails and phone calls with concerns regarding House Bill 6427 with the state militias. So from my understanding, from some of the notes that I received, and based on what you said, and Chairman Boyd was alluding to this, that there's a nonprofit side of this, which the trustees has said to me that they are a official 501c3 registered here in the state of Connecticut in the federal government. And then there's a military component of this that falls under your department. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how those different sides interact and where these trustees and current members fall under that? Because I think that's where some of the confusion is.
Yeah, so they're two separate entities, right? In fact, so I'm definitely concerned with the military component of it, the militia component, and that's the state guard, the state militia, and the 4 governors guard. The trustees are established to support the 4 governors guard, 2 horse and 2 foot, 2 separate entities, and this bill honestly has no impact to the trustees. I can tell you 3 out of the 4 trustee elements, so 3 of the 4 nonprofits, we call them the Friends of, actually support the units. So donate money to operate the units, donate money to the state coffers, if I have it correctly. So 3 of the 4, the one exception, unfortunately, is the one that provides the obstacle for at least 4 years now. Hopefully that answers the question. I appreciate the question.
So thank you, Chairman. I mean, what I heard you say, which is good, is that you do not believe that this legislation has an impact on the trustees and the 501c3 nonprofit part of the foot guard and the horse guard. Is that correct?
Right. They have their own bylaws. I believe the president of the first company, Governor's Foot Guard trustee element, will speak to you shortly. I'd offer that you ask him the same question. I'd offer that you ask him if he's following his own bylaws right now, because in our analysis, technically, he's not eligible to be the president.
Okay, so they can still operate in the way they want when it comes to the ceremonial functions. Is that correct?
The unit is, yes, right, absolutely. The unit is ceremonial. Again, the trustees are established to support the unit. That's the way it was back 1771, right?
Okay, so you're not looking to interfere with what they're doing on the ceremonial side of things?
No, not at all. Not at all. This is both, actually. Again, it builds relevancy to every year at times like this when we have to go before the state legislature. And oftentimes, like I said earlier, we're asked, why do we actually need them? So, typically you would see just a ceremonial piece of it at a parade or when we do the governor's inauguration. What we're trying to do is, again, get both elements in part where they're both operational. And again, we don't have any control over those private entity that we know as the trustees.
Okay, I think the trustees, one of their main concerns is that they're going to be, if this bill passes and the military department is creating the bylaws, they're totally going to be cut out of the process of the organization, really not have input going forward, and they have a long-standing tradition of having input. If this bill passes, will you at least, even if you don't have to do, on an official, based on the law, will you include the trustees in the process of creating the bylaws, have dialogue with them in the operations of this organization so that they can continue to feel like they're being included and continue on with the tradition that they've had?
Yeah, so again, they're a private entity. They're more of a social organization. In ideally, the two interact at some point. But the best example I would say is that we would get jammed up from a state perspective if we treat them like a quasi-state organization. So they're a private entity. They do have input to the unit, and again, they're incorporated to support the unit. And what you may hear, or what I would argue, is that they currently are not supporting the unit. I would ask the president why the current unit is locked out of the High Street Armory. Our department has established probably 4 years ago the Armory as the Hartford Armory, not the High Street Armory, as their home base as part of the state militia.
Well, thank you very much, General Levon, for that further clarification. I look forward to hearing more of the testimony today and trying to see if maybe there is some common ground or a compromise here that makes everyone happy with this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to ask these questions.
Thank you, Representative. Any further questions for the General?
I don't see any.
Great. The General, thank you so much for taking the time to come speak to us. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you again. I appreciate all the support for our Guard, our militia, the entire department, and what you're doing, the hard work you're doing for all veterans, many of which are part of our organization. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, sir. Next up, we have Commissioner Sadi. Commissioner, floor is yours, sir.
The
Thank you. Good
commissioners,
morning.
Oh.
And I have a little bit of internet instability. I'd just like to do both a sound and video check with Ms. Barron.
I can see and hear you, sir.
Thank you very much. Senator Cabrera, Representative Boyd, honorable members of the Veterans Affairs Committee. You know, I'm Commissioner Tomasati. I have the honor of leading the Connecticut Department of Veterans Affairs. I thank you again for this opportunity to join you and address you on several bills. I also thank you for your continued service to the state, to our veterans and our service members. I'll be speaking on several bills grouped by concept, beginning with Senate Bill 414, House Bill 5732, and House Bill 6316. These bills all relate to the general recognition of training and skills developed in the military by military personnel, which is an important and crucial part of rapid and effective integration, not only of veterans when they leave military service, but of those currently serving in the Connecticut National Guard, as well as in the reserve component of the armed forces. Several Connecticut state agencies do recognize the training received in the military through various comparative parity licensing and certification processes. These include, but are not limited to, the Connecticut Department of Labor, which may waive certain apprenticeship requirements. The applicant, when the applicant is a veteran or member of the armed forces or the National Guard. Current law also allows the Connecticut Department of Public Health to issue nurses aid and EMS personnel certifications. Veterans trained as medics or corpsmen. The Connecticut Department of Motor Vehicles exempts active duty for recently separated individuals when issuing CDL driver's licenses, so long as they can meet testing requirements, and sometimes waives the testing requirement based on parity. Many of these provisions were implemented pursuant to Public Act 14-131, and I apologize for not having the codified section offhand. As there are many such provisions in place, I do recommend the committee possibly request of the Office of Legislative Research, and there may be reports already on this, to review the existing comparative certification programs and specifically identify those areas of licensure where enabling legislation may be needed in order for a respective agency to recognize military training. This would avoid somewhat of an ad hoc approach on specific licenses and certifications, and what I think is a more broad umbrella approach to the overall recognition of military skill sets and training by various state agencies. I'll proceed to the next bill, and obviously I'll be able to take questions at the end. With regard to Senate Bill 860, this is an act concerning the use of Medicaid, Medicare, TRICARE funds to provide certain veterans with transportation and medical appointments. I have testified on this in the past before this very committee and have opposed this as I continue to oppose this proposal, albeit presented with good intentions. Recognize at the TVA that transportation can be a challenge for veterans. However, the Connecticut Department of Veterans Affairs does not have the staff or the vehicles or the infrastructure to implement such a plan, and the reassigning of current staff would have significant negative impacts on our current direct delivery of our core 4 function services, both at our campus and across the state. But I respectfully request that the committee consider in deliberating on this topic is that this implementation would require the DVA department to establish a new division within the agency responsible for coordinating vehicles and drivers, scheduling trips across the state of Connecticut, verifying eligibility of veterans to participate, and processing the billing and payments. To accomplish this, we have estimated that the DVA would require at least 2 to 3 vehicles and the commensurate number of drivers to be assigned to each of our 5 Office of Advocacy and Assistance districts. This would also require the establishment of a new staff position for a centralized transportation coordinator and another position within our fiscal office to process the complex area of billing related to these services. Centralized transportation and coordination would be needed in order to coordinate vehicles and drivers between the 5 districts based on transportation needs that may differ from district to district on a particular day. This would translate into a total of approximately 10 to 15 vehicles, 12 to 17 new staff positions, for which the DVA does not currently have PS funding in our proposed or existing appropriated budgets. With regard to funding from the billing of Medicare, Medicaid, and TRICARE, By law, these funds are not provided directly to the agency, but instead go to the state's general fund. As such, any additional appropriations, there would be additional appropriations needed in the agency's biannual budget in order to effectuate such a proposal. With all that said, the DVA has and we continue to work to connect veterans with existing transportation options through the DAV, local chapters of various veteran service organizations. And over the past couple of years, I've continued to write to veteran service providers, medical providers, and community-based nonprofits, providing them with information which you see in attachment A to my testimony, which lays out various veteran-based and actually non-veteran-based transportation options throughout the state of Connecticut. The next area I'd like to touch on relates to taxation. Senate Bill 412, Senate Bill 611, Senate Bill 787, House Bill 5738, House Bill 5739, House Bill 6315, and House Bill 6429. I know it's a long list, but I've aggregated them and want to speak to them generally. The department does not take a position on any one standalone proposed veteran tax exemption bill, but instead supports the overall intent of updating veteran tax exemption statutes. The department does, however, oppose Senate Bill 611 because it would require the Office of the Commissioner to conduct a study of veterans' tax abatements and exemptions and determine whether they should be increased or changed. The department does not have the necessary number of employees or the requisite expertise in taxation and property valuation to conduct such a comprehensive review. Furthermore, the DVA may not be the appropriate body to recommend potentially sweeping changes in state law that I believe is nested within the authority of lawmakers regarding tax exemptions. Instead, I support a comprehensive review of veteran tax exemptions with a view to modernization, such as appears to be embodied in House Bill 6429, which proposes the creation of a task force on this issue. Such a task force could include members of the VA committee, among your colleagues, the Commissioner of Veterans Affairs, the Commissioner of Revenue Services, representative of the Office of Policy and Management, representatives from statewide veteran service organization leaderships, the state departments, and representatives from the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities and Council on Small Towns. Task force would require some support staff in the form of administrative staff and those with some taxing, cost of living, and property valuation actuarial expertise. This task force could conduct a review of existing exemptions for the purpose of determining whether the exemptions amounts established many years ago, sometimes decades ago, properly reflect the valuation they once did in relationship to current assessments of real and personal property. Additionally, there are often overlapping exemptions which may benefit from a review to both simplify and improve the process. This could also consider permissive approaches, providing municipalities flexibility to adopt increased levels of exemption based on local capabilities. The task force could provide a comprehensive set of recommendations to the General Assembly and Governor for consideration in the next legislative session. Finally, and I know I'm speaking at length here, Senate Bill 859, an act concerning deposits to the Department of Veterans Affairs Institutional General Welfare Fund. This bill relates to the federal reimbursement funds for pharmaceutical and prescription drugs that the department purchases utilizing the federal purchasing formulary pursuant to an MOU with the federal VA healthcare system in Connecticut. The DVA purchases these drugs utilizing IGW, Institutional General Welfare Funds, and then is reimbursed for approximately 95% of those expenditures, amounting to about $400,000 per year. The reimbursed funds are not redeposited into the IGW account, but instead are deposited into the state's general fund. There have been discussions among members of this committee in the past, among the DVA Board of Trustees and veterans organizations as to whether or not this reimbursement from the federal government can or should be deposited into the IGW account, since the reimbursements are for funds paid directly by veterans into the IGW and not from appropriated funds. So although I would always support additional resources going to veterans, please note that any reduction to the general fund not in the governor's proposed budget as this one is, would need to be accounted for, as this would be a reduction in revenue to the general fund. To put in context this reimbursement, there are a number of federal reimbursements and per diem payments intended to offset the cost of veterans care at the state level utilizing appropriated funds. For example, the DVA has provided a per diem payment from the federal government for each veteran resident and patient. This goes to the general fund. And this is entirely logical, as a DVA receives a direct appropriation from the general fund for staff salaries and many other items to directly support those veterans who pay into the IGW from their program fees and applied income. The pharmaceutical reimbursement is somewhat distinct, as these items are purchased solely with those funds paid by veteran residents and patients as part of their monthly facility program fee, and again, part of their applied income for those who are on Title 19 or Medicaid. I thank you for your time, for your service to our veterans and to the state, and I'm happy to address any questions or respond to any informational requests you may have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it very much. Are there any questions for the Commissioner?
Representative Boyd.
Good morning, Commissioner. Welcome back. I appreciate
Thank
you joining the committee again this session early on. Just a quick question in regards to the IGW. Do you have any long-term concerns that fund will remain solvent with the current way that money is taken out and put in? Just kind of what's your crystal ball or concerns looking at that fund as a standalone piece?
Thank you very much for that question. And yes, there are some concerns with regard to the solvency of the IGW, as many years back, maybe 8 years ago, there was a beginning of a transfer of some of the appropriated expenses over to the IGW, and the IGW purchasing items for operational purposes at the agency. What I have done over the last several months is conducted a deep dive into our accounts PS, our OE, which is other expense, those are both appropriated, as well as the IGW, and have extrapolated out what our solvency is. So we are looking at a solid IGW over the next essentially 18 months, but without structural changes, that there will be insolvency sometime towards the end of potentially this biannual budget. That being said, I have already identified savings in the IGW, working with the Office of the Governor and OPM for some adjustments in the IGW structure in order to add, I would say, several quarters, if not longer, of solvency to the IGW to provide additional time to ensure that there is solvency in the long term. The last thing I want to do, whether I'm sitting in this chair or proverbially in the commissioner's chair or somebody else, is really to pass this off to another administration or another commissioner. So we're looking at resolving this now. The one caveat to this is, should we in any shape, manner, or form fall into a deficiency, we've been assured by the Office of Policy and Management, the Office of the Governor, that we will continue to pay our bills at the agency, and that we will not take away pharmaceuticals, medical purchases, food or beverage, or any of those things which are currently purchased with the IGW from our veterans. But structural changes are needed. Some items are being moved to OE. Some items we are saving on some areas of IGW expenditures. And we do have some donation opportunities. We are moving some expenses over to donations in a sustainable manner. So while there is a concern if we maintain on the current path, we're changing that path, that direction, to build more time of solvency and long-term solvency. I will be also obviously testifying before the Appropriations Committee, and I'm sure there'll be questions regarding the IGW as well. This $400,000, if it goes into the IGW versus the general fund, will support long-term solvency. That being said, the caution is here that is a loss to the general fund, so that would have to be accounted for, as well as if the agency budget is reduced by that amount and it's a zero-sum game, it does nothing to support the agency. It is just moving dollars from one area to another, which from a substantive standpoint doesn't change the fiscal operational setting. I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate it. And as always, thank you for everything you do for our veterans and everything your department does. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Boyd. Any further questions for the commissioner?
Senator Austin has a question.
Proceed, ma'am.
Thank you, and I apologize for the noise in advance because I have two other Zooms going on at the same time. I just wanted to make sure that the language is correct now in the bill on 859 with the IGW. Is that the way? Does that resolve an initial problem?
Yes, and what the senator, yes, Senator. First of all, thank you both for the question and the opportunity to clarify. There was some, I guess, linguistic, excuse the pun, Senator. I know you're a linguistic specialist in the military, linguistic issues, but this does clarify it. Obviously, going forward, the details of the actual draft statutory or draft legislative language will be important, as well as interfacing with the administration based on the potential impact to the general fund.
And what we're doing is replenishing funds that were derived from veterans themselves. Essentially.
Yes, so the funding for the Institutional General Welfare Fund, which is a unique fund, a handful of agencies have these. They are generally, and in all cases I've seen, funded through non-appropriated funds. So these are agency-generated funds. We have two main sources. After 4 months of residency at the DVA, which there is no charge, on the 5th month, pursuant to federal law, the agency does charge a program fee for our veteran residents to offset some of the direct costs. Also, those who are on Title 19/Medicaid pay their applied income to maintain compliance with DSS Medicaid requirements into the IGW. That is where the expenditure for the pharmaceuticals comes from. What is unique in this is we receive about a 95% reimbursement from the federal government for those expenditures. So yes, it is dollars paid by our veteran residents and veteran patients. The federal government reimburses because we use their purchasing formulary to an MOU, which we developed about 4 years ago to save money. And as part of that, we do get the reimbursement. Prior to that, the agency was paying out of pocket with no reimbursement.
And the money right now is going into the general fund of the state, not this non-appropriated fund. And the general fund had nothing to do with the revenue that we paid for, that we used to apply towards these payments.
Yes, so
Okay.
both on both accounts.
So
That
it's
it is
not
paid
something
out
that,
of the-
I'm sorry, Commissioner, go ahead.
It is not, these pharmaceutical products are not purchased with appropriated funds. They come out of the IGW. And as is the case with nearly all, there may be a few exceptions of federal reimbursement per diem grants and others. Those
before,
go
madam.
to the general fund and not back into special institutional welfare funds without a
So-
statutory provision to that effect.
So essentially, when you talk about the general fund would lose some dollars, they're not really losing dollars because they never had any expenses associated with it. I just wanted to make that point, and thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for all you do.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Any further questions for the commissioner?
Don't see any hands raised.
Great. Commissioner, thank you once again for visiting with us. We look forward to speaking to you again.
Thank you all, Mr. Chairman. If I take one moment of personal privilege, and I meant to extend this at the beginning of my thanks to Major General Yvonne. What was not in his presentation, and although it was a small aspect of their overall COVID-19 response mission, they have been assisting, supporting the agency with medics since the beginning of the pandemic, which has been an essential element to our COVID-19 mitigation protocol. So again, my great thanks to him and to his team over at the Connecticut Military Department and the Connecticut National Guard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Next up, we have Senator Kelly. Senator Kelly in the room.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Leader, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Chairman Boyd, ranking members, Senator Ciccarella, and Representative Vale, as well as the distinguished members of the Veterans Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 787. The bill originated from a constituent of mine, Shelton resident Michael Passos. He recently retired from the Army after 20 years of service. And for the first 12 years of service in our nation, he was an infantryman and a Special Forces weapons sergeant. He then became a warrant officer and finished off his final 8 years of service as an aviator flying Black Hawk helicopters made in Stratford, world's best, by the way. He has 6 combat deployments to both Afghanistan and Iraq. And from his 20 years of honorable service, he has developed some service-related injuries, which left him totally 100% disabled. In some states like South Carolina, 100% disabled veterans are fully exempt from property taxes. Basically, what this bill will do is offer our veterans who have served our nation well, but have been left 100% disabled. And I think it's a small gesture that our government can make to individuals who make that sacrifice on our behalf to provide an exemption of 100% of property taxes. That's sum and substance of the bill. It's pretty straightforward. Any question?
Thank you, Senator. Any questions for Senator Kelly?
Representative Boyd.
Senator Kelly, thank you for joining us. I just want to say I appreciate you introducing this bill. You've introduced it before in front of this committee, and I think that there's an opportunity for us to do some good work for veterans with this. So we're hoping to find a way and move it forward. I just want to thank you for proposing it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Boyd. Any further questions for Senator Kelly?
Senator Austin.
Please proceed, ma'am.
So Senator Kelly, I put in a bill this year to look at the tax abatements for veterans sort of across the board. And because the tax abatement structure was set up a number of years ago, actually decades ago, and it has not kept up with the value of what that tax abatement is supposed to be equivalent to. I'm just asking for a task force to analyze it. I understand what you're talking about with this particular veteran. Would you be willing to look at the task force bill also to make sure that we are providing the abatement as was intended at the level that it should have been when it passed all those decades ago, so that the value is equivalent to today's dollars?
Senator Austin, I thank you for your commitment and advocacy for veterans. I would certainly welcome something like that. I don't think as a society we really appreciate the service and sacrifice that our veterans do for our benefit. Without their sacrifice, we wouldn't enjoy any liberties we have. So I would certainly welcome any type of relief that we can provide veterans, because I think it's a modest thank you that we can provide them for that.
So I want people to be very clear on this, that this is an impact on municipalities. And when we vote for it, it would be not a volunteer impact on municipalities, that this would be a mandate on municipalities if this should come to a resolution. The first year would just be a task force. Your bill, should it pass as it is today, would be a direct impact today, but it should not be voluntary for a municipality to choose whether or not they're giving a veteran a tax break. Because if we're going to make it with parity across the state for veterans, I think it has to be just that, a mandate, requirement. And I speak as a veteran that this should matter. And when I was first selectman, we passed a number of voluntary tax abatements for veterans, but I don't think it should be necessarily a veteran to go through that process. I think it should be mandated, and I would be looking forward to your support, sir. Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Representative Vale.
Please proceed, Representative Vale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Senator Kelly. I think Senator Austin hit on some of my, but I have concerns. Sometimes I certainly, with the merits of the bill, 100% on board. My concerns are we do create this mandate to our municipalities because, and I think that's why this task force is important, because we've had these bills every year with different type of fees or different approaches to different veteran, having an abatement with their local taxes. But that's easy for us to say here in Hartford. People back in Shelton and Stratford and Stafford Springs and Putnam and so on and so forth. And Hartford, they're going to have to make up for that loss of tax revenue. So it's easy for us to sit up here and I think on that task force, even the commissioner mentioned that it's important that you have representatives from the municipalities on there to voice their concerns. That's where my only concern is. I certainly believe if the state were to reimburse the loss of money to the municipalities, then I might be able to just jump on board with this. But I certainly have reservations about that. And then I was going to ask the same if you would support that task force, which you already answered. But I do have some concerns about this. But I certainly, I'm certainly willing to listen to it more. I just want to get do you have similar concerns or what, do you have any, other than a mandate, or is there any other approach we can do to offset the cost to the municipalities?
Well, obviously, anytime the state acts and we tell our municipalities to do something, we should try to look at fully funding that. Because if it's important to us, then it should be important enough to put in our state budget. The budgets are about priorities, and all too often at the state level, we don't fulfill those promises. Veterans, I believe, are a priority because without veterans, our society as we know it, the rights and liberties that we enjoy, the opportunity to live our lives the way we want to live our lives, is really due to their service and sacrifice. And so I would make this as a priority, a high priority, that, when somebody who through that service and sacrifice has rendered themselves for the benefit of the nation and ourselves disabled, I think this is a small thank you that can be returned. I'd welcome the task force, because anytime we can study something and get more information on the issue, I think that only makes for better and more sound policy. So let's look at what the costs are. Let's see what the amount is, and then put that in the priority of issues in the state budget, and maybe see whether or not we can find the resources in the budget to fully fund such a relief for these individuals who are disabled.
Thank you, sir. Any further questions for Senator Kelly?
No other hands raised.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Leader. Thank you for coming to testify today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Next, we have Representative Garibay. Representative? No. There you go. Good morning.
Good morning.
The floor is yours.
Morning. Pardon?
The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. Chairs Senator Cabrera, Representative Boyd, Vice Chair Senator Maroney, and Representative Napoli, and Ranking Member Senator Ciccarelli and Representative Vale, distinguished members of the Veterans Committee. I am here to testify in favor of House Bill 6314, an act extending the time period for veterans to apply for military training evaluation. As a daughter and sister of family members who served in our armed forces, I have a passion for ensuring that our veterans receive the best treatment possible by our government. Additionally, my district is a hub for many veterans, veteran-related attractions, and very importantly, businesses that employ or seek to employ skilled veterans. I decided, working with a business in my district of Windsor Locks, to introduce this legislation because I believe we need to provide veterans who are transitioning into the workforce more time to obtain waivers for training. Military training evaluations are necessary for apprenticeship programs and require the evidence of satisfactory completion of a program or course of trade instruction within the state, as well as military discharge documents. They are conducted by the Department of Labor, and veterans currently only have 2 years to apply for this evaluation. According to a 2018 Forbes article entitled Overcoming Barriers of Veteran Employment, one of the biggest barriers to a smooth employment transition for veterans is an inability to match certain skills learned in service with those that are in need by our local employers. Additionally, many veterans must simultaneously deal with the tougher elements of civilian transition, such as PTSD or other physical ailments. Providing our heroes with more time to receive training evaluation waivers will improve outcomes in employment and self-sufficiency. Thank you so much for your time today. I ask that you give this bill a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. We appreciate you taking time and coming before the committee. And I know based off our prior conversations, working with veterans is very important to you. So questions for the representative? Questions for the representative?
I don't see any hands raised.
Seeing none. Thank you. Have a great day.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Next is Joseph Nolan. Joseph Nolan.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Can you
sir.
hear me?
Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to Representative Napoli for inviting me to speak today. I'm going to speak on House Bill 5739 and House Bill 6315. On House Bill 5739, an act requiring municipalities to grant a property tax exemption to Gold Star parents and Gold Star spouses. My name is Joseph P. Nolan. I live in Waterbury, Connecticut. I'm a Gold Star father and a Vietnam veteran. My son, Sergeant Joseph M. Nolan, U.S. Army, was killed in Iraq on November 18, 2004. I would like to read part of a speech that I gave several years ago in front of the Veterans Affairs Committee concerning a partial property tax exemption for Gold Star parents and Gold Star spouses. If surviving spouses of veterans are allowed a property tax exemption, it would seem logical that surviving parents of soldiers killed in action should be allowed the same exemption. In the case of fallen soldiers who were never married, such as my son, the tax exemption for surviving parents makes even more sense. In this era of Connecticut history, where eliminating taxes is unheard of, asking for a tax exemption for Gold Star parents may seem preposterous. That being said, I recently learned that the states of Massachusetts and New York give annual annuities to Gold Star parents. Massachusetts gives $2,000 each year to each Gold Star parent. The state of New York gives $500 to each Gold Star parent annually. While Connecticut does not have the Gold Star parent annuity program, I would suggest that the partial property tax exemption bill would be a positive way to recognize parents who have lost a son or daughter in military combat. The amount of money lost in tax revenues would be low. I say that because the number of surviving Gold Star parents living in Connecticut is low in a state that has a population of over 3.5 million people. Also, the dollar amount of most tax exemptions would be minimal. For military veterans who are also Gold Star parents, I would advocate for a double tax exemption. Also, and this is important, and this is new, also income ceilings for eligibility for Gold Star parents and spouses should be eliminated with this bill. I have found that cities that have already adopted a tax exemption for Gold Star parents have income restrictions that eliminate most Gold Star families from getting the tax exemption at all. Income ceilings should be eliminated with this bill revision. So therefore, I propose that Public Act 17-65, an act concerning a municipal option property tax exemption for Gold Star parents and spouses, be changed to read an act concerning a property tax exemption for Gold Star parents and spouses. One might ask, why should we have a Gold Star parent property tax exemption bill? If the war veteran had survived, he would have received a tax exemption. In this bill, the parents get the exemption. Also, the bill is a way to remember and honor our fallen heroes and their parents or spouses who have suffered a loss that can never be recovered or made whole again, at least not in this lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. We appreciate your remarks, and thank you for the sacrifice of your family as well. So I appreciate
Thank you, sir.
taking this.
I have one more bill, and this is a short one, but it's relevant to what we were talking about earlier.
Yep.
This is called House Bill 6315, and an act increasing the amount of a property tax exemption of certain veterans to $5,000. Again, my name is Joseph Nolan. As a Vietnam veteran and Waterbury, Connecticut homeowner, $3,000 is taken off my gross assessment of my house tax. In other words, $3,000 is subtracted from my gross assessment of $92,800. My net assessment is therefore $89,800 per year on my house. In actual dollars, I save $180 off my tax bill for being a war veteran. That sum equals about 2 weekly visits to the grocery store for myself and my adult daughter. I pay $5,406.86 each year in property taxes for a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom home in Waterbury. Over the years, the value of the home has increased, but so has the amount of money paid in taxes. This does not include the property tax paid on my car, which last year was just under $600. The veterans tax exemption has not kept up with increasing property taxes based on the increasing value of the house. I propose increasing the exemption from $3,000 to $5,000 per year for Connecticut war veterans. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Questions for Mr. Nolan? Representative Napoli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank the leadership of this committee for allowing Mr. Nolan to testify today, and of course for giving us a public hearing on both these important bills. Mr. Nolan, I want to thank you for all that you do for the city of Waterbury and veterans in Waterbury and statewide. And of course, I deeply sorry about your son, and thank you and your family for his service, and we think about him often. A question I had, doing this research, I could not find, do you know how many Gold Star families are in Connecticut?
I do not. I tried to get that information. There's an office up in Hartford at the State Armory. There's a civilian who works up there who is kind of in charge of that. And I spoke to her. I don't know whether the information is classified or what, but I could not get a reliable answer. I can tell you that in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, we've lost 65 people from Connecticut. I can also tell you that as far as the Vietnam War is concerned, not all, but most of the Vietnam War parents are deceased. But again, not all. And the other thing is that some Iraq and Afghanistan war parents have moved out of state. I heard that Waterbury has 6 Gold Star families. Now, I don't know how reliable that number is. The other thing you have to understand, we have several families in Waterbury who are siblings of people either killed in Vietnam or people killed in Iraq. That they're not parents, they're not spouses, they're siblings. So they would come under the heading of Gold Star family, but they would not qualify for these bills that we're talking about, at least right now.
Okay, thanks. And then just one more question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Nolan, in your testimony, you talked about the Gold Star annuity program in Massachusetts and New York. Do you know when those programs started?
I can tell you, I heard a good story on that. The one in Massachusetts, this is kind of interesting. It started so long ago that one of the families that benefited from it was, believe it or not, the Kennedy family. Now, don't forget, John Kennedy's brother, Joe, was killed in World War II. So Rose Kennedy and Joseph Kennedy Sr. qualified for that annuity program, which might seem strange given the fact that the Kennedys, you know, and their wealth, that this family qualified. But so that's how long that program in Massachusetts goes back, you know. I actually proposed this bill in Connecticut a couple of years ago, but it didn't even make the committee.
Thank you very much, and thank you for testifying. And once again, thank you so much for all that you do for veterans in Waterbury. We certainly appreciate you testifying today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rob.
Representative. Any other questions for Mr. Nolan? Any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you, sir, for testifying.
Thank you.
Next is Dennis Conroy. Dennis Conroy.
Dennis is here. Let me ask him to unmute.
Am I on?
Yes, Mr. Conroy, welcome.
Yes.
The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Representative Boyd. Senator, State Representative, my name is Dennis Conroy. I'm from Southington, Connecticut. I'm past Commandant of the 1st Company Governor's Foot Guard, which I enlisted back in 1968. So I've got a long history with the command and with the relationship between the Connecticut Guards, at least the 1st Company, and the state of Connecticut. First of all, I'm here testifying against House Bill 6427, which involves the giving of power to the Adjutant General to write bylaws. I was listening to General Levon's testimony, and one of the things that came was he really does not have a complete understanding of the relationship between the state of Connecticut and the governor's guards, and in our case, the Board of Trustees. The trustees are nothing more than a holding company. We hold in trust the armory that we have on High Street in Hartford and the property that has been given to or assigned to the 1st Company over the years. And we're responsible for maintaining that property and making it available to the command. Second of all, I am a member of the 1st Company Governor's Foot Guard, as are all the trustees. We took the oath to the state of Connecticut, while some of us, in my case, being in particular, we're retired from the active group, also have been serving for years as support for those people that are eligible to be activated by the state of Connecticut. The current general statutes, as they are presently written, allow the general and the governor and the military department to do everything that they currently are doing and they want to do. There's nothing that would change by giving them the ability to rewrite our bylaws. We are a self-governing organization. The charter that was granted to us by the General Assembly back in 1771 says that we are a self-governing body. We elect our own officers. We are to be able to develop bylaws, and we are able to amend those bylaws. This dispute goes back a number of years. I've testified against this bill a number of times. And in fact, when I originally testified, the Adjutant General's office, then was General Martin, was claiming that he had the right to change our bylaws, and he eliminated the voting rights of about half of the command. And inactive and active members are all under one roof. The active members, while eligible to be activated by the state of Connecticut, we are the other retired members, who we call life and associate members, are there to support them. We all wear the same uniform. We take the same directions under our commandant, who gets his directions from the adjutant's office. The change came when General Martin decided to write what he calls a policy, which really eliminated our bylaws, and he took control of the unit. Why, we don't know. Everything that he wants to do, or the military department wants to do, they've been able to do that for years. They're making a claim here on the tents. We were doing practicing and training to put up hospital unit type things for under the Medical Reserve Corps, which serves the entire greater capital region, which involves, I think, some 20 towns or 25 towns in the capital region. And then the state public health department came in and decided they were going to take it over, and they asked us to train. And that was
Mr.
fine.
Conroy,
We already had.
would you yield for some questions?
Sure, anytime.
So you alluded to the adjutant's testimony earlier, and he had said that the requirement that he's asking for in regards to bylaws is that they're not required. He's made the point to say that they're not prohibited, saying that statute currently requires you to submit your bylaws to the military department and to the TAG for approval, and he's saying that's an unnecessary step. What's your reaction to that piece? Basically saying that if the unit wanted to continue to have bylaws, particularly on the corporate side, it's not banning them. It's just not requiring them to go through him and his role as the commissioner of the department.
Well, first of all, there are no corporate bylaws. I mean, the corporate bylaws he's talking about are the Board of Trustees. It has nothing to do with the command bylaws, right? We have a set of bylaws, a command bylaws that were approved, that we adopted, I don't know how many years ago, long before I got in 1968, and have been amended from time to time. And under the statutes, under the existing statutes, they had to be submitted for approval, I suspect, just to make sure that they're in compliance with the state statutes. So back under General Demers, Assistant Adjutant General Demers, he had formed a committee where they were trying to make some uniformity with all four of the units.
Right.
And at the time, they asked us to do something to our bylaws, and we change them and do some things, and which we were not really amenable to do. The same thing with General Martin. This whole thing came about because the command voted unanimously at a meeting of some 50 members that were present that our bylaws were fine the way they were. All they had to do was, if they wanted to bring us under the umbrella of the state of Connecticut, is to activate us.
So you know, as a you guys are a nonprofit entity. I think all four are. Is that correct?
No, let's see. What I'm saying to you is the general really doesn't understand it. We're not a nonprofit entity. All right. The nonprofit entity is the Board of Trustees who hold property, period. We are all members. Forget the trustees. The trustees have nothing to do with the bylaws.
But if you're an incorporated nonprofit in the state, you have to have bylaws, I believe, for incorporation.
Right. But it has nothing to do with our service to the state of Connecticut. It has to do with us being able to raise money to support our armory.
Sure. Understood that.
Which, by the way, through the efforts of the military department, not under General Levon, but under General Martin, we had a lease agreement with the state of Connecticut that they, for some reason, because we did not want to grant them unfettered access to our armory because of the value of the things that we have in that armory, right? They decided to tell the Department of Public Works, who had control of the lease, to cancel it. And that started this whole feud back some 20 years ago.
Okay. Well, both the military department and our foot guards and horse guards are essential parts of our structure here. We don't want any feuds, so we want to be able to,
I appreciate that.
To be able to do what, the military department wants to modernize, but we also certainly don't want to do anything to put the existence of these entities in jeopardy. So that's the.
Let me say this thing, Representative.
That's the fact. That's the
fact
threat.
of the matter is, in the 50 years that I've been, in 50 plus years I've been, and I've served under many adjutant generals, I do not remember, and I was talking to some of the members, we do not remember ever getting a phone call from Broad Street saying, we need a color guard. We need to put somebody on the street. We need you to support us. As a matter of fact, I think even when General Levon was a major, I believe, there was a troop, our troops have been deployed and they need to support at the state armory to answer phones and doing some of those things. They asked us to supply personnel, which we did on our own volunteer time. And it wasn't the active members that did it.
Sure.
It was mostly the retired people. So
So
there's
you
no
can correct.
need for these bylaws.
No, and I appreciate the dialogue back and forth. And as I'm trying to understand this from different points of view and trying to be objective,
Yes, sir.
it seems to me that there's part of this that's part of the guard unit, and there's requirements that if you belong to the state guard, correct? That if you're on the active side, if you're retired, and I believe there's a statutory age of what, 64, that when you leave.
64 for officers, 65 for enlisted people.
Okay, but you can continue your service with the horse guard or foot guard primarily on the ceremonial side. Beyond that, under, this is the way I view it, and correct me if I'm wrong, under the nonprofit side of the house, not as a member of the formal state guard. Did I describe that correctly?
Yeah, you're using the term of the nonprofit, has nothing to do with it. It's all one unit, it's all one pot. We have members on even the people that could possibly fall under the jurisdiction of the military department. They are supposed to be paying dues and assessments for all of the on the so-called non-state part. It's only when the state only really gets involved in it when they put us on active duty. And then we're subject to this Uniform Code of Military Justice,
Sure.
just like the National Guard and everybody else. So why he has to get involved, or why the military department has to get involved in writing the unit bylaws, and is beyond me, because they can do everything that they currently are doing, anything they want to do in the future, just by activating the command.
Okay.
Or, which they have done for years, saying, we need you to do this. Can you provide a group of people to do this? And we, like I said, in the 50 years I've been involved, have never, ever, that I can recall, refused a request from the Adjutant General's office or the governor's office.
Yep. What's the membership right now of the foot guard, your foot guard unit, the first?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure. There's a group that has, like he says, we're ordered to drill on Broad Street.
Yeah.
Pulling them out of the armory that have been providing for over 100 years. So
yep.
I don't know what's going on, other than to say that I know there's a bunch of them that are in the quote state guard portion that have never even signed a historical book that goes back to 1771.
So
that's when those are the people that should be part
okay.
of the foot. They are not part of the foot guard as far as we're
concerned. So what we're trying to vet through is the state guard versus the foot guard. And I keep saying the nonprofit because that's the state guard side of it. And, my understanding through statutes, at least, is that to be a member of the state guard, you don't have to pay dues. But if you're going to join the foot guard or the horse guard, which I've been referring to as the nonprofit side, through your bylaws, there is a dues. Is that correct? Okay.
That's how we support the organization. That's how we do things like support the armory, provide transportation for some of the, things like buses if we're going on trips or wherever we're doing. It's basically to maintain the administrative side of our organizations.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Conroy. Any questions for Mr. Conroy? Any questions? All right. Well, we appreciate your time coming before the committee today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next is Kimberly Glassman. Kimberly, welcome.
Hi, Chairman Boyd. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for having me this morning. My name is Kimberly Glassman. I'm the director of the Foundation for Fair Contracting. I just want to thank Chairman Boyd, Chairman Cabrera, and as well as our ranking members, Senator Ciccarella and Representative Dale. Just very quickly, the Foundation for Fair Contracting, we are a nonprofit organization that's been in Connecticut since about 1994. We are a labor management organization, so we represent both sides. We have on our board, we have both affiliates of the Connecticut State Building Trades Unions, and we also have a number of contractor associations. And the focus of this organization is to focus on monitoring and compliance of government contracts. So that's federal, state, municipal contracts. Particularly, we focus our efforts in construction. So we monitor these contracts for compliance with federal and state labor law. I have provided testimony. It is online. My testimony is regarding a number of bills. House Bill 5732, Senate Bill 414, Senate Bill 413, and House Bill 6316. But today, in the interest of your time, I'm going to just limit my remarks to House Bill 5732. The Foundation for Fair Contracting is opposing House Bill 5732. This bill establishes reciprocity of licensure. And it's unclear in the bill which agencies and exactly which licenses, but it does say trades. So we are assuming by that, and we could be wrong, but it's written that way, that this is limited to the Department of Consumer Protection and limited to construction-related occupational licenses. Our concern here, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions, is that there could be unintended consequences with reciprocity in this industry, as this is a very dangerous industry. And these licenses are there to make sure that they know that anybody who is applying to sit for a licensing exam in Connecticut has met requisite experience, training, certifications, we are very concerned with public safety and ensuring that all workers and contractors on all construction sites, public and private, are working under the safest possible standards. So we are concerned about public safety. We are concerned with this bill, and we are asking that it not come out of committee.
All right, thank you. I think, in the group that you represent is one of the key stakeholders that going forward, because this licensure issue comes up every year in different aspects, is our goal is just simply to make sure that active duty personnel and their spouses or folks who retire and come back to Connecticut after active duty are very easily able to find jobs and their experience counts for something and ultimately stay here and pay taxes here. So, if there's some ideas that maybe in the future we can work with your group of how to do that respects the apprentice process, but also, gets our goal of not Connecticut being on a list of states you don't want to be stationed at because the licensure is way too complex. So we look forward to that conversation.
Thank you. And I know that wasn't a question, but if I could just respond to
Please.
that very quickly. No, I very much appreciate that. We actually had a study done in 2014. I'm certainly happy to send that study. It focused on wage standards for our returning veterans in the construction industry was the purpose of the study. But what the study also showed us is that the construction industry in Connecticut is the greatest employer, is the largest employer of our returned veterans in Connecticut. And that is something that this industry is very proud of. The unionized construction industry has programs that I did mention in my testimony, and I know I've spoken with some members of this committee directly about, and we're looking at trying to develop some type of webinar or some type of, we'd like to do something for you to show you what this program really is, but it's called the Helmets to Hard Hats program. It has employed tens of thousands of our returned veterans directly into construction trade unions. And some of these programs actually do provide training to active duty members on military bases. So there are these programs. We're not great at promoting ourselves. Yeah. So we just assume sometimes that folks know about these programs, and that onus is on us. And we need to make sure that your committee members understand that these programs exist, and we want our returning service members in Connecticut to take advantage of them, and we certainly want to provide access to these programs. So happy to work with you, Chairman.
Yeah, no, please send that across. One of the reasons there's a whole myriad of licensure bills is the Department of Defense has rated Connecticut pretty low amongst other states as far as friendliness with licensure, the ability to gain it. So that has also been added into the calculation that the DoD when awarding funding to states. So it's a point system for a lot of different things. So we are potentially losing out on some funding from the DoD because our licensure is antiquated. And we know we can't do this in a vacuum. We're working with general law, labor, and the governor's office to ideally have some type of comprehensive licensure bill that isn't in a silo. So again, I appreciate your voice to the conversation.
And I just want to add one quick thing is, when we say licensure, that means
Yes, it does.
hundreds
Yes,
of
it
different
does.
industries, right? That's not just limited
Correct.
to the 6 construction trades that require an occupational license in Connecticut. So I hear you loud and clear, but I cannot stress enough that this is an extremely dangerous field. I included an article actually that was published in September of this year. That was a study done of the 25 most dangerous jobs in the nation, half of which are in the construction industry. And we just lost a licensed worker. You know, I feel terrible bringing this up, but you know, in West Haven at the VA, as folks know, over the fall, we lost a 36-year-old pipe fitter in a horrible accident. He was married with a 7-month pregnant wife at home, and he lost his life on the job. And so even in the most controlled of environments, this can still happen. And so, you know, public safety and maintaining safety standards on our project sites is our number one goal. So as we look at this, we just want to make sure that those safety standards are being strictly adhered to.
Yep, understood. Questions from the committee. Representative Ferrero.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank her for her testimony today. Obviously, the last bit of information that she brought forward hit home with me. My wife was an employee at the Veterans Hospital for almost 40 years, and I represent West Haven, and that accident was a horrific accident. And she brought up safety standards, and I just want to, for the record, say that that accident, if not for the fact that the environment wasn't totally safe, would not have happened. And she is right. There are many dangerous professions within the construction industry. That pipe fitter's death was traumatic and certainly a tragedy. So going forward, you know, licensing and getting access to these jobs and keeping these workers safe is primary concern. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Ferraro.
All right, other questions? All right, hearing none, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Next is Michael Sharo. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Michael Sharo.
He is in as a participant. Let me ask him to unmute.
Okay.
Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes. Michael, welcome to the VA committee.
Well, thank you, Chairman Boyd, and I'd like to thank the whole committee for this opportunity to testify regarding HB 6427. I know we've already had Commandant Dennis Conroy testifying on this. My name is Mike Charlman, in Vernon, Connecticut, and I am a member in good standing of the First Company Governor's Foot Guard for 30 years. I'm not testifying today representing the Governor's Foot Guard or any other entity. I'm speaking solely from my 30 years experience as a volunteer with the First Company Governor's Foot Guard. I'd like to first clear up a little bit of confusion that is always surrounding, I think, the militia units and the Governor's Foot Guard. Even state residents that are familiar with seeing our red colonial uniform marching in parades and ceremonies don't seem to know who we are. And I'm finding that even members of the General Assembly and other officials, and even members of the military department, don't quite get who we are. There's a lot of people who think that we're some sort of fraternal organization like the Knights of Columbus or the Shriners, We are not. Some people think that we're a veterans group like the VFW or the American Legion. We are not. And we are not paid members of the National Guard. Although the militia units do fall under the command of the Adjutant General, General Ivan, when and only when we are activated and placed on orders. We are purely volunteers and we dedicate our service to the state, in the words of General Ivan, for the flag. To ensure this volunteer status, the military department several years ago had us all sign a written statement that we were willing to be placed under military orders and serve the state, quote, without pay or allowances. So first, to eliminate any confusion that we are somehow part of the National Guard, that is not the case. A little bit on the history of who we are and how we came to be. Prior to the creation of the state National Guards in the early 20th century, all states had their own militia units. And the Governor's Foot Guard was created specifically in 1771 to serve and protect the governor and the General Assembly. Now, over time, our charge or our duties have become primarily ceremonial in nature once the National Guards took over their military role in the states. Now, once the National Guards came into existence, most states just revoked or disbanded their militias. Connecticut did not. There are still 4 militia units in Connecticut, and Connecticut was wise enough to preserve this part of our rich military history. We exist to this day as a living history of Connecticut's military heritage, and we volunteer our time simply to perpetuate this history. Now, General Ivan spoke of the need for modernization and relevancy of the state militia units in order to become a modern operational unit and fall under federal guidelines and standardization. I have to ask why. The state militia units were not preserved to be modern military units, and we cannot be placed into federal service. We volunteer strictly to serve only the state of Connecticut. Adding to the confusion regarding the militia units is the military's misconception that only our members who are on the military 1-1 roster are members of the Governor's Foot Guard. This is simply not true. As former Commandant Conroy already testified, anyone who swears membership and takes the oath and signs the membership roster of the Governor's Foot Guard is a member of the Governor's Foot Guard. That's the way it's been for 250 years. Since the inception of the military department, some of our members, it's not required, will also sign the active military 1-1 roster and be eligible to serve under the command of the Adjutant General of the National Guard. The rest of us who are not on the 1-1 roster can still serve in a purely voluntary basis. Now, me personally, I am on the 1-1 active military roster. But again, because I signed a waiver, I am a pure volunteer, and even if I'm put on military orders, the military department has a right to put me on orders, activate me, have me do tasks for the state of Connecticut without pay or allowances. That is at their discretion.
So, and I appreciate you taking the time and your perspective. And there is, as we're trying to thread this needle, right? And I think you bring up the 1-1 versus the, I had been using the nonprofit side, but the ceremonial side,
volunteer side, sir.
Okay. Well, you're all technically volunteers, I suppose. And the history of this is, in state statute, it is viewed as a military unit. It's just the modern military structure has gone away from state-centric militia units and have gone through a coordinated dual-purpose National Guard. And even with our National Guard, there are people that are operating under state orders and there are people operating under federal orders, and it gets complicated. So I certainly understand the differences, between the state guard and, let's say, the foot guard type thing. And there are different requirements, is where it gets very confusing. If you're on the 1-1 roster, there's certain things that you can do and otherwise. I guess my rambling question to you is there some middle ground here? Is there some ground in your estimate that the military department can not require these things be submitted to them for review, which right now by statute they have to? They can further look to modernize, and we can talk about what that means, the 1-1 side, but also preserve the heritage and the importance of having a foot guard and horse guard in the state, because it is truly a treasure. Do you think that there is some middle ground here where your organization can continue to operate on the backs of the volunteers, which is huge, and raise money through your nonprofit and corporation, but also the military department has the flexibility to continue to retool and grow as the world changes? So your thoughts?
Absolutely, Chairman. That middle ground actually has been in existence since the 1930s, and the military department existed. We have balanced that middle ground by self-sustaining ourselves. Again, I'm speaking of the First Company Governor's Foot Guard. We're self-sustaining. We have the luxury of having our own armory. So without a burden to the state and without taking those taxpayer dollars, we've self-sustained ourselves for a long time. That middle ground was, we take care of ourselves, no burden to the state, but when you need us, go ahead and issue us orders and we'll come and perform whatever duties you think is necessary. Now, in order to maintain that balance, we of course need to have our own structure. And that structure was dictated and still is dictated by our current bylaws. Our current bylaws allow for all members, both active on that military 1-1 roster and retired members, to determine the organizational structure of our unit and the right since 1771 to elect our own officers, both our civil officers and our military officers. This proposed bill on the table right now would eliminate this historical autonomy by allowing the Adjutant General to adopt bylaws unilaterally, would in essence remove our members from running their own unit. And the militia units would simply become part of the National Guard. The passing of this bill would in essence be the end of the GFG as a historical military unit. And it would be a great loss to Connecticut's history.
Sure. And nobody wants that, but again, trying to thread the needle is there's under the current that the Connecticut Guard is going to get called under federal orders, because it's just not what it's established to do. So can you, or I know there's several members from the First Company that's testifying. Can you make sure that the committee clerk gets a copy of your bylaws? We would love to be able to review them. And I don't believe any of them have been submitted through testimony already.
Yes, absolutely, Chairman. We can give you a copy of our existing bylaws, and where the committee, again, may get confused about this, and the confusion will be thrown by the military department, is, and I believe Dennis Conroy already spoke about this, the military's inability to change our bylaws unilaterally was quite frustrating for them. They did not like our structure and the fact that we could elect our own officers and such and run a civil organization. The former Adjutant General issued a general order that overwrote our bylaws and basically rewrote our bylaws by general order. That is meaningless, of course, because our bylaws are a contract, in essence, a memorandum of understanding signed by both the military department and us. You can't just unilaterally erase that. And unfortunately, the 1-1 members were intimidated by that, and they were told that they have to follow that general order, otherwise they could be discharged. So that is why some of them were forced to be housed at the National Guard Armory, where they are now. And the rest of us are still housed at the High Street Governor's Foot Guard Armory. So we can get you a copy of our current
we appreciate that.
bylaws.
Yep, thank you. All right, any other questions from the committee to Mr. Chiro? All right, hearing none, we appreciate your time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Next is Randy Collins from CCM. Mr. Collins, welcome.
Good morning. It's
The
been
floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. It's been a crazy morning with lots of different things all of a sudden moving very quickly for us.
Well,
But,
if you've been following this committee today, we certainly have the gamut of topics as well. So welcome.
Thank you. So my name is Randy Collins. I'm an advocacy manager for the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. And I'm here today, unfortunately, in opposition to Senate Bill 412, 787, 5738, 5739, and 6315, which all would impose or expand current unfunded or underfunded mandates on our towns and cities. Unfortunately, towns and cities remain almost exclusively reliant on the imposition of regressive property taxes to fund all levels of local services. And unfortunately, these proposals simply add to that burden that's being placed on that regressive system. Currently, there are 99 mandated property tax exemptions that are on the books. This, 787, which would, or it is one of those ones, unfortunately, the Gold Star Parents, 5739, would make it an even 100 property tax exemptions. Every year, committees throughout the legislature propose and pass property tax exemptions, just further undermining municipalities' ability to provide key and essential services. Police, fire, park and rec services, which do they provide elderly services, childcare services, education that we have to do. I don't want to come up here and testify against these bills. It's not easy to be the one that comes up and has to say no. But, just like I said, I was in P&D the other day and testifying against a tax exemption for group homes that provide really good services. But we're at a point where our municipalities can no longer afford to see the property tax base, eviscerated even further. We have 19 communities we have 6 communities that have over 50% tax exemption. We have another 19 that have over 30% of their taxable property exempt. And every time that we exempt one of these or expand an exemption, it simply shifts the burden from that where that exemption has been applied to residential and commercial payers. This is shifting burdens onto our restaurants, to people that have just gotten laid off. I mean, our restaurants are brick and mortar retail. They're hanging on by their fingernails right now. And is it fair to say we're going to benefit one group, and put that burden onto somebody else? We understand, while these may be very well intended, it's just something that we can no longer afford. And fortunately, it puts us in a situation where we have to say no. We had a number of mayors testify in finance the other day, looking for the state, to create an additional pilot reimbursement. I think if the state had met its obligation and funded pilot at the statutory levels, but it hasn't done that for 20 years, that maybe these smaller ones wouldn't be putting us in a position where we have to say no. But as I said, we're in a spot that our towns and our cities just can't afford to see that tax base further eroded. So I would ask that you oppose these bills. I know Commissioner Sadi said it was talked about House Bill 6429 creating a task force, and I think we probably need to do that to look at all of these different tax exemptions that are out there, understand the benefit that they provide and the implications to the municipalities that have to carry them. If the committee was to go forward with those, CCM would be happy to help staff and provide municipal members to participate and look at these. As I said, I think we understand the service that our veterans have provided, and hopefully we can work with the committee to ensure that we are providing a means of saying thank you for that service and sacrifice that they've made.
So, Mr. Collins, I was just going to ask you that question. I'm glad you mentioned it, that if we go forward with the task force idea, would CCM be a willing partner to be a part of that? And it sounds like yes. So we certainly, if that goes forward, we'll be doubling back to you. So
yeah, thank you very much.
Our distinguished ranking member, Mr. Vale.
Thank you, my neighbor in the northeast corner. Good afternoon. CCM, how many towns and municipalities do you represent?
Currently, we represent 168 of the 169 towns and cities.
With Vernon being your only holdout?
Yes, Vernon is the only holdout. Unfortunately, we had them. They dropped off. But when you get to 169, unfortunately, if anybody bumps, it does go down. So
I'm just teasing, and I know Vernon's always in good hands. But anyways, I too share your concerns on these issues. I think they're great in theory, but when we come up here in Hartford and we have these ideas and they're all very, very well intended, we want to find ways and like, hey, this is a great idea. Now we're going to mandate that the municipalities do it. And I'm with you on this. I have a hard time with this. These discussions are very difficult because we want to find ways to help our veterans. I just think as a state, if we're making state laws and creating state policy, then we should be owning that policy and not be passing it on to the municipalities. Now, if we were going to fund the revenue lost to the municipalities in some way, then I think then these ideas are more concrete. So I know it's hard for you to come up here and do this testimony. I know you do it every year. I know that we listen to you. I do. I understand that. I know my towns have these same concerns. We want to find ways. And both my towns are go above and beyond when it comes to veteran services, and we're very proud of our veterans. So it's difficult, but and you had already mentioned. Would you? And you're definitely. I'm not normally a big person on task force, but instead of us hashing this out year in and year out, I think it's time that we do have a discussion. I think the commissioner had a great list of people who should be on that task force, and both CCM and costs were both included in that. So you're definitely in favor of being part of that conversation and part of that task force if we move forward with it.
Yes, and I will submit testimony on 6429. I just everything kind of went sideways on me yesterday, but that we would affirmatively say yes. I mean, we're at CCM, we are never afraid to have a conversation, even on difficult subjects. And oftentimes we find common ground. I know we talked cancer presumption for firefighters, PTSD benefits for police and fire, and that we've been able to work towards a common ground. And I think that's shown CCM willingness that it doesn't have to be one way or all one way or all the other way, but a lot of times we can find that middle ground that both sides can live with and provide a benefit to our shared constituents.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Any other questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Collins. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I don't believe Mr. Moriarty is here, so we'll go to Mr. Vasquez, President of the Trustees of the First Company Footguard. Louis, welcome to the committee, sir.
Yes, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you all for meeting and allowing us to speak regarding House Bill 6427. I agree 100% with what Michael Chiari and the former Commandant Dennis Conroy mentioned, but one of the things I just wanted to mention that to clarify or any other questions. Yes, we are a civilian organization, a state chartered civilian ceremonial unit. When Charles mentioned that the past Commandant or the past Adjutant General came in with general orders and rewriting his own bylaws and instituting, one of our last group meetings, command group meetings from the First Company Footguard, 100% voted against accepting them. That was 100%. The other piece that I want to reiterate is the General Yvonne said only 1-1 are the only First Company Governor's Footguard. The rest are no longer part. That is only 20% or around 20%, less than a quarter of the entire First Company's Governor's Footguard. We consider ourselves, we're over 65. We're not members of the 1-1. We are volunteers. We are associate members, alumni, whatever, but we are current members until we leave ourselves. So that's what And the other concept about being locked out, well, the reason why they were locked out was they were coming in off hours, stealing equipment, which is some of it's owned by the Board of Trustees. And one moment, and then they even deleted the security footage. That's how you could say it's stealing. But anyways, the Board of Trustees is a separate entity. This bylaws bill really doesn't, we're part of it, yes, but we're not. But we are vehemently against passing a bill. We don't want to rescind the right of the state units or our first company to have our own bylaws.
So, Mr. Vasquez, again, thank you for your time. And I know, I believe you talked with somebody from my office earlier in the week.
Yes.
I appreciate that. And I got some of the notes back. We're tasked with, making policy that fits the whole state, right? And there's 4 units that this potentially directly affects. And I have not heard much from the other 3 units, which I think we're probably going to do some outreach. We've heard a lot from some members of the first company, and
well,
go ahead.
What part of that is because those 3 units are housed in state properties, and they already have their bylaws rewritten by the state. They conceded and went with what the Adjutant General's office wrote. We have our own armory, owned specifically by the Board of Trustees. We have our own equipment and so forth that was donated to us or held in our responsibility to support First Company Government Footguard. Okay.
So my understanding is that if this bill goes forward, it'll only directly affect the Connecticut Guard aspect of it that is under the direct military control of the Adjutant General. That this bill would do nothing for as we've heard to a bunch of different things. Some of your members call it the volunteer side, although you're all volunteers. The civil entity, which is the nonprofit and corporation. My understanding is this bill, and I'm not sure even if there's legal grounds that this bill would allow them to have anything to do with your nonprofit status, which is distinctly unique and individual and outside of government. I guess I would ask you for your response to the general when he says that the state expended resources to maintain the Connecticut State Guard side and has the statutory authority to activate the State Guard, and therefore they're asking to be able to reconfigure, to organize, and perhaps we should go back to them and ask exactly what they have in mind there on the one-to-one members who are the Connecticut State Guard that have nothing to do with the nonprofit or the civil side. So this bill would not eliminate the Board of Trustees as I understand it. Is your understanding maybe different than mine?
I don't think it will, but it's saying it may adopt bylaws and regulations and issue orders and circulars for the administration of the militia units. Now we're a civilian. We're not really a militia unit anymore. It's a civilian organization. So if
by
they
statute,
write
you're a
it,
military organization too.
right.
I guess that's the needle we're trying to thread here. And, we're kind of the objective group here, listening to both sides, trying to figure out, we obviously want to modernize the state and make it forward. We don't want to lose these units. So
we don't want to lose the history. That's the key. That's the biggest.
Yep.
We have a humongous museum in our armory. We have a lot of artifacts, a lot of historical, all the way back to 1771, stuff from Mark Twain, some of things like that. It's history is right there.
Yep.
And we don't want to jeopardize that.
I started looking through in preparation for today a lot of the different testimony, and there's a testimony from, I think, a Major Dwelly that's been submitted. that's in support of the bill. I don't want to pit you guys against each other, but I don't know if you had a chance to read his testimony.
Not at all. He is the current commandant, which was elected by only 1-1 members at 20%. The entire foot guard, First Company foot guard, had no vote whatsoever. So he said, it's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah. Okay. And I asked one of your other members earlier, is there some middle ground here? Is there some compromise to be had in your estimate, sir?
Yes, and I've offered some with the General Yvonne, and we've offered many things, and they're totally ignoring it. First of all, when they first came in, when I first came in, and so one of the things I suggested is get rid of that order, and he didn't. After that, we tried to meet, and we met and we discussed our situation. And the situation is a small group, Dwelly and a few others, that have pulled away from the rest of us. They didn't want any part of the alumni associates. They had a clash between things. And they separated and they went to Broad Street. They followed the order, and they stayed in Broad Street, and they moved over, and they wanted no part of coming back to our High Street Armory and part of the foot guard. So that's the glitch. One of the things that they asked was for, the general says, well, we had a lawsuit 10 years or so ago to help clarify this problem. And so I went back to the Board of Trustees when I became on, and I suggested, let's cancel it. Let's see if we can negotiate and work this out, which we did. We stopped the lawsuit. Next, they wanted uniforms. Well, I turned around and went back to the board, and I said, let's give them some uniforms and let's see if we can work this out. So I suggested we gave them 15 uniforms, which Major Dwelly came and picked up and so forth. And I said, here's my thought. You want these people to stay and work or stay and drill at your Broad Street Armory. Okay, I call them the foot soldiers. Okay, you take them and we'll keep the armory and the history on High Street. That's the headquarters of that. In addition, we're going to start a Governor's Foot Guard, First Company Governor's Foot Guard concert band. And there was only 3 or 4 people that went with Dwelly over to Broad Street and did not want to come back and participate. The response was no. So there's no negotiation. It was a dead issue. They belong to us as 1-1. They don't belong to you. We don't want. In our armory, we have our own music room. The state had to build them a place for any musicians to work. And it was just, as a musician, they did not like it. You can't drill, you can't play in a huge armory. That's the tone and so forth. The music is not right. You'll hear that from Chuck Lugani later on shortly. But the thing is, we have all that. We have some of the equipment, the big kettle drums and so forth. We have everything right there. So that was my negotiation piece. Let's handle the armory, let's handle the history, and let's have the band. And anytime, like always, if they wanted to mobilize or they needed a band to march, our volunteers would get together and throw it and do it. And we've always done that. We're not saying we're not going to do it. We're offering to do that.
All right.
And that would solve the problem.
Thank you. Representative Vale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Is it morning? It's still morning. I just wondered, you mentioned the High Street Armory. Is that open to the public?
Because of COVID, yes, it's open. We'll open it and have tours, and we're even going to rent it out if we can, if it needs to be done. Like the City of Hartford came in and used it for their COVID quarantine for 3 months. But the museum is ready to see, and once we get things back to normal, hopefully we'll have it open to the public like a regular normal museum. Most museums are closing it now anyway because of the quarantine. So it's there. And if anybody wants to see it, just give us a call and we'll gladly walk you through.
Sounds great. I appreciate it. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Val. Other questions for Mr. Vasquez? Other questions? All right, sir, we appreciate your testimony. And I had asked one of your other members earlier if you could forward to the committee clerk your current bylaws. That would be helpful
Yes,
as
sir.
we're trying to wade through this and be objective. So
All right.
thank you, sir.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Yep. Take care. Next is Mr. Todd Unifer. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Todd.
He's in the room and I did ask him to unmute. So hopefully-
Okay. Mr. Unifer. All right, well, we can come back to him after Chuck Linenti from the first company Governor's Foot Guard as well. So Chuck, if you want to go, and then Todd can jump in after you if he's available. So the
Yes.
floor is yours, sir. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Chuck McNelly. I'm from Glastonbury, Connecticut, and also I am the current band director of the First Company Governor's Foot Guard Concert Band. I did want to follow up with a couple of questions regarding the bill and how it does impact or does not impact the members of the Foot Guard who are not 1-1. Is the military department in their in this bill trying to say that they want some control over organizing only those members of the Foot Guard who are active 1-1 members? Or is the motive to be able to, at any point in time in the future, control the entire organization and order the entire organization to mobilize, for example, for a exercise or for an emergency? I think that's one of the things that is confusing to some of the members. Certainly if I'm on the 1-1, which I used to be, but I am no longer due to age, I was happy to be mobilized and go wherever I was needed. I always volunteered to do whatever I could. But now I think people are joining the organization, the Foot Guard, but not the 1-1. And they're worried that, they can be ordered to do stuff that they didn't really want to do when they signed up to be in the organization. So that's a question of confusion that I'd like clarified. We talked about separation, but what does that really mean? Certainly, when it comes to equipment and the band, as Mr. Vasquez mentioned, there are no real music facilities at the Broad Street Armory, no real place to rehearse a band, acoustically or musically. Whereas the Foot Guard Armory in High Street has all those facilities. And also, I'm concerned, especially with the Veterans Affairs Committee. I know they ask us every year to play at the LOB for the veterans, for the Hall of Fame ceremonies. And I've done that for many, many years. It was always a big honor for me to do that for the veterans and to listen to all the stories of those honored were tremendous. This year they asked one of the people who was over at Broad Street about it, and they never contacted any of the musicians who were still at High Street to play. And as a result, we did not do the ceremony this year, which I am very, very disappointed in. So there's this feeling that somehow the people in the 1-1 are now against or separate from the rest of us. And it never was that way until 2 years ago when they moved over. And I don't understand why we can't still be operating the way we always have been. Whenever a request would come for anything to do with us, we would be happy to do it. And on the reverse side of that, we feel that we do not want to be ordered to do stuff that we don't sign up to do. We would like to be asked, and we will always volunteer. That's been our history. It's been our tradition. So I'm not sure the bill, this particular bill, is on the surface, it just seems like it doesn't have an impact, but I wonder if deep down it really does have an impact. I'd like some clarification on that from General Levon possibly, or the committee.
Well, and this is why we have public hearings, right? Concepts come up, and then public hearing process is where we dig into it, and sometimes one question leads to another, and the committee has to go back and look at things. So all these questions and discussions have been good. We're keeping lots of notes, and obviously we need to be satisfied with some things going forward. So I appreciate you raising some other questions, and we've written them down. So, all right, any other questions from the committee? And I would just say it is always a treat when I attend an event and the guard is there and the band plays as well. You guys do a remarkable job. It makes every 4 years inauguration day a special occasion, and other events and parades that the band plays in and you guys are at remarkable. So I appreciate your work there and your volunteerism. So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, next is let's see, who do we miss? Is Todd available?
I now don't see him in either room, so.
Okay, so we'll move on to Cameron from the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Union 777. Is Cameron here? Cameron Chapin?
He's here and I've asked to unmute. Oh, there we go.
Oh, there you are, sir. Welcome to the Veterans Committee, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? All right.
Yes,
I'm a little technically challenged. Chairman Cabrera, Chairman Boyd, Ranking Member Ciccarelli, Ranking Member Vale, and members of the committee. Sorry. And members of the committee, my name is Cameron Champlin. I represent Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Local 777. The local is comprised of approximately 3,500 working men and women that reside in the state of Connecticut. I'm also a member of the Heating and Cooling Board. We are very strongly opposing House Bill 5732 for various reasons. The requirements for occupational licensing are very different from Connecticut's in many states. For instance, we have to take into account the difference in climate for the installation of heating and cooling. Applicants from Florida, for instance, because of the warm climate, would not have gained the same knowledge as we do here. Codes are different in many states and require different installations for heating, cooling, and plumbing. When anyone applies for occupational licensing in Connecticut, we must ensure that the person is qualified for the safety of our residents. Therefore, experience from another area must meet the same criteria as we have here. Any applicable knowledge a person has acquired from another jurisdiction should be and is certainly considered when applying for one of the state occupational licenses. For these reasons, especially the safety of our citizens, we ask that you vote against this bill moving forward. We do strongly support Senate Bill 413, which exempts veterans from all licensing fees. Although Public Act 14131 does accept veterans from licensing fees, which are included in statutes, it only references a waiver of application fee and the license fee for issuance of the license. This bill will clarify that the intent of PA 14-131 to also waive any future renewal fees for a veteran's license. We do agree with the intent of House Bill 6316, Senate Bill 414, but since these requirements are already in statutes, we believe these bills are not necessary. Public Act 14-131 includes all of the intentions of those bills. Thank you for your consideration today. And now, if you have any questions, I just would like to say I am in full support of helping veterans in any way. Our organization does have what we call VIP, Veterans in Piping, and they work closely with the armed forces throughout the country. We bring in people into our apprenticeship programs. They do get any of the experience that they have in the service. They certainly do get it here, and we're very proud of that. So if there's any questions, I certainly would like to answer them.
Thank you for your testimony. I've looked through the stuff that's submitted written wise. Again, we're trying to figure out a way to make Connecticut a place that active duty people want to come and their spouses could be licensed and retirees. And I think you probably agree. And we'll just need to find what's the right balance. And, we appreciate if, as this conversation goes forward, you continue to be part of the discussion. So.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other questions? Other questions? All right. Thank you, sir, for your time.
Thank you.
Next is Heidi Cornell.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the committee. I want to thank you for letting me talk to you today. My name is Heidi Cornell. I'm a retired colonel and a veteran who served 23 years in the United States Air Force. I served 12 duty stations, including combat deployments in support of Operation Deliberate Force in Bosnia and Iraqi Freedom in Baghdad. But Connecticut is my home. I was raised here and I returned a couple years ago after retiring. And I'm here today to request your support for proposed Senate Bill number 787 to exempt property taxes for 100% disabled veterans in Connecticut. Connecticut is one of the highest property tax rates in the country. We're number 4 of 50 states as far as highest property taxes. And yet we do almost the least in the way of tax exemptions for those who have fought for our country. While I understand there are other proposed bills this session to create task forces and studies for an overhaul of the state's exemptions for veterans, and it's an overhaul which I believe is very much needed. Those studies will take years to have an effect, and Senate Bill 787 would provide immediate relief for our most vulnerable veterans who need that help now. Connecticut is not a state that many veterans come to retire. We have one of the lowest in terms of state's veteran population. We're number 45 out of 50. Veterans come here because it's their home, but we don't make it easy for them to stay. Unfortunately, many are being driven out because of the high property taxes. 18 other states already exempt their 100% disabled veterans from property taxes. And an additional 21 other states provide significantly higher exemptions for their disabled veterans. In fact, of the 5 highest tax states in the nation, which includes Connecticut, Connecticut is the only one that doesn't exempt 100% disabled veterans from property tax. The current tax exemption laws do very little for our 100% disabled veterans. For example, in the town of Fairfield, where I live, we have only 0.02% of our population, just 17 individuals out of over 62,000 residents who are 100% disabled veterans. And those veterans would get, on average, only a 9% tax exemption on a median priced home. So in the whole state, there are only 4,400 veterans that are 100% disabled, and they make up just 0.1% of the state's population. And of those, not all are homeowners. So this is an extremely small segment of the population that we're talking about. But these are the people who have defended our rights at the expense of their own bodies and health. I feel that this bill is long overdue, and it is the right thing for Connecticut to do now before these veterans are taxed out of their homes. I thank you very much for taking the time to hear my comments.
No, thank you for taking the time to testify. A lot of the bills in this committee are aimed at wanting veterans to retire here, stay here, and active duty personnel be assigned here. So, your comments are right in line with our goal. We just need to figure out how to get there in a lot of these things. So, other questions from members of the committee? Other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I believe that Todd Unifer is here. Todd, we had skipped you before.
Yes, I don't know if you can hear me now.
Yes, we can. And I'm sure I butchered your last name. What's the
oh my God, no worries. It happens all the time. Unkefer.
Unkefer. I apologize.
No worries at all.
All right, sir. The floor is yours.
Okay, well, it's an honor to be able to testify on this bill. Pardon me, I didn't expect my name. I'm having some technical issues. So. I think one of the key things that was made was it would be a great idea for someone from the committee to come to our armory to see some of this history that is a question, and to see exactly firsthand what the First Company Governor's Foot Guard is. There is a lot of apprehension. I've been in the First Company for 11 years. It was about 2 years in when I first started beginning to understand the structure of it. So it's not that difficult now that I understand it, but I think that would be a great idea for you to see the history that's involved with that. Now, I unfortunately have to run, but I do want to say that Dennis Conroy's testimony was dead on. The military department for several years, if you look back and you can see not too far back where the bylaws of the soldiers' home, they wanted to get involved with that, which I understand that may be a different issue because there is a lot of funding involved. But we are a historic unit. We were created. There were two capitals in the state of Connecticut at one point, New Haven and Hartford. The First Company was created so that the governor felt safe traveling in between. The Second Company, well, is still in existence, and that was actually the first commandant was Benedict Arnold. So the state militias.
We won't hold that against you.
Oh yeah, but it's just I'm saying that we have a deep-rooted issue in the state of Connecticut as well as national history. But I do have to run. I also submitted some testimony through email, and thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you for your time, Todd. Thank you. Okay. Next is Max Covell. Is Max here? Max.
Max is here. Oh, here we go. Oh.
Mr. Covell? Mr. Covell?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome to the VA committee. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Boyd, and the rest of the committee. Mike Charo had expressed basically all of the views that I had, and he did it very well. But I'll just go over a couple of things. I think one of the big problems is the interpretation of the term active members. The military department feels that the active members are the 1-1, where the First Company Governor's Foot Guard feels that the active members are everyone that belongs. So by the military only allowing members of the 1-1 to vote, that creates quite a problem for us. Another part of the little rift is that between the First Company and the military department is that at one point the military department decided to change our headquarter designation to the National Guard Armory. Our headquarters has been 130 years. And we see no reason for it to change. There's a small contingent who went along with the military department and moved over to 350 Broad Street. Now, that caused the rift between members of the first company, Governor's Foot Guard. And what that did was actually split the band, because the band is made up of both members of the 1-1 and what the military department would consider inactive members. But because, following up on what Chuck Lignelli was talking about, because the facility at the Broad Street Armory is not conducive to rehearsing, the majority of those band members have come back to 159 High Street. So this is where the division stands at this particular time.
Okay. I appreciate your comments in that regard. I'm even over the course of this hearing at points confused as to what's going on and who's what. So I appreciate you making mention of that. Any questions from the committee? Any questions? All right, Max, thank you for your time and appearing before the committee today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, next, I believe our next two are not present. Madam Clerk, is that correct?
Correct.
So we'll move on to Steve Kennedy. So Mr. Kennedy, welcome back to the committee. And I don't know how you get the last spot in every public hearing we have, so.
Well, this time I was just late to sign up, but thanks for having me. Sorry, just catching me right in the middle of making my kids lunch again. Bad timing always, but
no problem. Floor is yours.
Great, thank you. So today I wanted to come to speak to you on the bills regarding waiving the fees for veterans entering the medical marijuana program. Basically, the committee has tried to do this a few times before. The idea is that more veterans are turning towards cannabis for treatment for things like PTSD and chronic pain. But under federal regulations, VA physicians are not allowed to actually prescribe cannabis as a treatment. They're not allowed to sign off on a certification into the program. So basically what the veterans have to do is go and hire a private doctor at a cost of $200 to $300 to get a certification from them, make it more difficult to enter the program. So the idea behind waiving the fees is to basically provide kind of parity between veterans and someone who's seeing a private doctor who's actually allowed to write them a prescription in the first place. So veterans aren't going out and spending that extra cost. And I know that we had some written testimony from the dispensaries giving a little bit of an idea of how many people we're talking about. So I know in the past, the issue has been that DCP comes back and says, as far as that, for all they know, 150,000 veterans could now come and join the program and be entering for free. From what I saw, the highest estimate they had for the number of veterans that they have going to the dispensaries is about 5%. So it's not a huge impact on DCP. Something that I didn't see in the proposed bills that we would also advise the committee to take up is what Illinois does, which is basically rather than requiring an official certification from a physician, all they have to do is show a diagnosis from the VA of a qualifying condition to enter the program. And in that way, they're able to enter the program without having to go and hire a private doctor to do it. And in that case, there's no impact on the state because they'd still be, if you don't do the fee waiver, they're still paying the same as anybody else, except they don't have to go and hire that private doctor. So that's something else that we would also advise, and we'd be happy to work with you on language on that if that was something that you wanted to take up. But that was basically all I had for today. I think I know this. It's like I said, this committee's heard a lot about this in the past, and we're glad to see it back, and we definitely would support moving forward with this, particularly with the addition of just the requirement of a diagnosis rather than a certification. Thank you.
Very good. No, as always, thank you for your testimony. Questions from members of the committee? Questions from the members of the committee? Okay, Steve, as always, thank you for your advocacy and thank you for your service. And I'm sure we'll have the chance to have you before us again.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Madam Clerk, is there anybody else that's in the waiting room or anybody else that would like to
I do not see anyone in the waiting room or as a panelist who's on the list who has not had a chance to speak.
Okay, well then we will adjourn this public hearing. I thank you to the members who hung with us. So take care.